Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you're well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more relationship stories, and if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too. Let's crack on with today's first story. Now today's first story comes from Guilty Balance 556. It is a story we've covered parts of in the past, but it has got some new additional information and an update as well, so if you do want to skip parts of the story, timestamps are always down in the description and along the timeline below. Thank you. And it's titled, Am I the A-hole for telling my mum if she wants to plan a wedding to get remarried? I, 32 female, recently started planning my wedding with my fiance, 31 female, and my mum immediately jumped to help us plan. I thought at first it'd be okay. She will call vendors and venues she likes, will give them my information, so they will call me about a scheduled time, and my mum swoops in to say, it'd be rude not to go since they invited you. It was obvious it was her after the third time, when she wouldn't stop giggling and admitted to calling beforehand and making appointments. I wouldn't take issue with this, but my mum and I have wildly different tastes. Every time me or my fiance tell her something like how we want to have this colour for the tablecloths or these flowers, she'll tell us that they look bad and will give us her own plan. She recently showed us a massive binder of different ideas she wants us to look through. It's exhausting. Every step she will insist on looking at her ideas, and when we reject them, she'll throw a fit and tell me I don't love her because I ignore all her wishes. I also want to add, I think she's had it in her head since I was a kid she'd planned my wedding. Even before I came out and dated men, she'd comment on how excited she was for the wedding, and when I told her my fiancé proposed, she immediately started berating me about when we'd have the wedding so she could help us plan it. Part of it is that when she married my dad, it was a small courthouse affair, because she was pregnant with me at the time and never got a proper wedding. My dad also died 17 years ago, and she dates sporadically but never for longer than a few months. The last time me and my fiance went to see a venue, she tagged along and made all these comments on how gross everything was, pointing out all the tiny things wrong with it all. The person showing us was getting annoyed. My fiance was getting annoyed and so was I. She eventually said, if this were my wedding, I'd never even consider this dump, despite it being absolutely beautiful and within budget. I snapped and told her that if she wanted to plan a wedding so badly, she should get remarried. It was cruel, but I was so tired of her trying to have her perfect wedding through me. My fiance thinks I'm not at fault, but the rest of my family doesn't. Am I the a-hole? Edit, adding answers to a couple of common questions. Is she paying for the wedding? No, she's not paying a penny. Why didn't you set boundaries with her? We have. She doesn't listen and will cry and guilt me and my fiance until we go along with her or look at what she's picked out for us. So OP was overwhelmingly voted not the a-hole in this situation, and then went on to update their post and says, hello everyone, I took all the advice to heart and me and my fiance had a sit down and looked at the comments together, and we agreed we both need to grow spines. Our wedding planner is truly a saint and had no problem setting up passwords with vendors like some people suggested, and it was a great suggestion. Thank you. We then invited my mum to dinner and told her that she has to stop trying to help us with the wedding. It started off bad as she brought her binder and had her own wedding dress in her car. The dress is in very bad condition, not fit either me or my fiance, and is quite frankly hideous. I would never say that to her face, though I've told her every time she's asked that I want to pick out my own dress and she should keep hers for if she wants to get remarried. She assumed that we had invited her to apologize and let her plan the wedding however she wanted. How she jumped to that conclusion, I have no idea. We lied about not wanting her to get overly stressed in the hope she'd take it better than telling her that she's been causing problems and that she hasn't been helpful. She didn't take it well and started crying and saying all she ever wanted was for me to have the perfect wedding, and she'd already given up on getting the perfect son-in-law and grandchildren, so the least we could do is let her plan the wedding. It stunned us both, as she has never said a bad word about me liking women. Not when I came out, not when I got my first girlfriend, not when me and my fiance got engaged. That put me over the edge, and I told her that she wasn't going to plan anything. She was a guest and nothing more, and I would be cutting her speech if she was going to behave like a child. She had a full-on tantrum, so me and my fiance paid and left her to cry and scream in the restaurant. That was all fine and dandy until our florist called to tell us my mum had called to try and get the flower arrangements changed behind our back. I called her and she tried to lie until she realized she was backed into a corner and admitting to doing it because she knew what was best and was trying to help. Needless to say that I've now uninvited her from the wedding with the full support of my fiance and my soon-to-be mother-in-law and father-in-law. A commenter says to OP, they says, also, does she not know the same gender couples can have kids? OP responded saying she's well aware, but apparently it wouldn't count if we adopted or my fiance carried the child because biologically it wouldn't be her grandchild. I can't carry a child because of health complications, and me and my fiance have agreed that if we ever do have kids, it won't be at least for a few years, which isn't good enough for her. She wants us to pop out grandbabies for her yesterday. Someone says, maybe point out then that even if you were straight, it wouldn't be biologically yours because of health reasons. Surely she should be able to understand that. Opie says she's gotten it in her head that if I was straight, I wouldn't have health issues and that I should just try harder to have a child. All reasoning falls on deaf ears, unfortunately. Opie continues in another update and says, I'm so done, just so done with her. 3 months of hell, but finally, me and my wife are happily married. Not once did my mum think of me and what I wanted. She wouldn't stop trying to call vendors, get things changed, and try to guess the passwords. At one point, we changed the passwords every week to random things, so she couldn't guess them. We didn't post the date anywhere and had the invitations that the guests couldn't share the date and location, yet somehow she got both. We even told her that the stress was too much and we were going to wait until the summer or later to get married, and she screamed at us, telling us that we were horrible and cancelling it to spite her. We blocked her phone number, reduced the wedding budget significantly so we could hire good security. Thank fucking God we did, and gave them pictures of her because somehow she found out the date, time and location and came in a motherfucking wedding dress and demanded to be let in because it was her wedding. I am beyond done. I'm typing this as me and my wife are waiting to get on our plane to go home after an incredible honeymoon. We even looked at job openings in apartments that are at least 6 hours away from where we currently live because my loving mother has taken to sending us letters, calling me a horrible daughter, and sending packages that are piles of pictures from when I was a kid. And I loved her unconditionally with notes asking why I don't love her anymore and why I banned her from her wedding. How excited she was for it. How it was her right as a mum to go. She tried to guilt me. She cursed me out and what? Thought I'd give up, let her do what she wants and run my life for me. An act if she's not been a pain in my ass since I told her that me and my wife were beginning to plan the wedding. My best friend, who was house sitting, got the honor of opening them all and sending us the contents. She hand-delivered the first one the day after the wedding while we were on the plane. I know because the Ring doorbell caught it and all the other ones she delivered as well as the ones the mailman delivered. I'm fuming, I'm pissed, and I want to scream because what the fuck? She tried to ruin my wedding. My own mother tried to ruin my wedding and is trying to make me feel bad. She tried to plan my wedding for me, threw a tantrum when I asked her not to, tried to sabotage it, and then crashed it. But sure, I'm the problem here. Edit. Adding some context now I've calmed down. My mum had a courthouse wedding, which is why she wanted to plan mine. And after my dad died, she hasn't found someone new to settle down with and have the wedding of her dreams. When me and my wife tried to set boundaries and put a stop to her calling vendors to change things and have us go see venues she wanted under the guise of us being invited when she'd made an appointment. When we tried to ask her to stop because we didn't want her to stress out, a lie to try and negate her reaction to being asked to stop, she threw a fit and let her true feelings be known about me marrying a woman, which boiled down to she was making a massive sacrifice and not getting a son-in-law and grandchildren. I also can't have kids. It would be very difficult to at the least, and adopting or my wife carrying the child wouldn't count because they wouldn't be her grandchildren biologically. I have 2 other posts where there's all of this in more detail if anyone wants to know more. Last of all, thank you to everyone saying congratulations to me and my wife. I've been looking at the comments and we'll be finding the wedding mole as well as working on evidence to get a restraining order and moving far away. Someone says to OP, match a state to a guest and tell them that you are moving there. When mother comes back stating she knows where you are moving, you have your FM. OP says we're considering doing something like that. Part of replanning the wedding was figuring out who wouldn't tell her about the wedding, so very few family members on my side and friends who know about all the chaos she's caused. But someone's still told, so we'll be finding out who and cutting them out of our lives, along with my mum. Another commenter says, and no excuses for the people who say, but she's family. Too true. OP says, that is the rest of my family, so I'm very used to it and very ready to leave every one of them in the dust, bar a few cousins. Someone else said to OP, I remember your older posts. I really hoped it would be different. Unfortunately, she is too unhinged. Just call the cops every time she shows up to your home. Put your phone on record every time you leave work or your house to get her on tape and get a restraining order. I'm so sorry. OP says we'll definitely be getting a restraining order and will not be telling anyone where we're moving to until we figure out who told her about the wedding. Someone says, OP, I'm so sorry to read this and I'm fuming for you. It's a shame that parents feel entitled to their children. What a flaming narcissist she is. OP says, I swear she gets more narcissistic every day. Ever since she went mask off and told me that she's given up on getting a son-in-law and grandchildren because I came out to her and started dating women. Someone says, has she always been thus unstable and possessive? Those are the two words that immediately come to mind. Irrational is another. There's something going on in her head that made your wedding a DEFCON 1 level threat. OP quotes that and says, not really. When I was younger and my dad was around, she was very calm, but after he died and I started dating, the wedding comments started and they increased as I got older and eventually became this absolute clusterfuck of a situation. She never had her dream wedding, so she got it in her head. She had planned mine for whatever reason and wasn't happy when I wanted to plan my own wedding. OP adds another update and says, my cousin was the wedding mole and I'm disgusted. Context. I got married a few months ago. While planning the wedding, my mum tried to steamroll over me and my wife's decisions and basically have her own wedding because she married my dead dad in a courthouse. We tried to tell her gently she couldn't. She went on a homophobic rant and tantrum in the middle of a restaurant we'd met at, tried to crash my wedding in her wedding dress, and then tried to guilt me and my wife into feeling bad for not letting her in. So I found out who told my mum where and when the wedding was. There was no grand plan. We'd wanted to do that after getting a little more settled into our new lives. I went back recently for work and invited one of my cousins out to lunch, picking somewhere my mum wouldn't go so that there'd be no accidental run-ins. Me and this cousin are really close. We're similar in age and she was one of the bridesmaids. She's like a sister to me. She's also the most timid / shy / non-confrontational person ever. Big red flag, I know. So we went out to lunch and who showed up? My mother. She showed up and was like, oh hi, I didn't know you were in town. Why didn't you call me? Lovely day we're having. How's wife, mother-in-law and father-in-law? Have you two started talking about kids yet? She was being civil. I wish she'd screamed and cried so I could have looked like the same one. My cousin wouldn't look at me. Not only did she tell my mum that we were going out to lunch, but she told my mum about the wedding. She tells me that her mum, my aunt and my mum pressured her into it, since they knew she'd know if the wedding was actually pushed back. And she told them. She told them despite knowing how crazy my mum is and how much crazier she's become. I'm not even angry, I just feel betrayed and so happy that me and my wife didn't tell anyone where we were moving so my mum couldn't show up at our door. I've had to cut off my cousin, the girl I saw as my sister, because she couldn't keep her fucking mouth shut despite knowing. I can't reiterate this enough. Every detail about how my mum was when she was helping us plan the wedding. I'm cutting contact with my entire family. It's not worth it. If you let in a little crazy, then let in the rest of the crazy. And the last set of relevant comments which OP replies to. Someone says, your mum knew your cousin was weak and walked all over her. Sounds like a bully. That's the way she tries to bully you. Good thing you aren't letting her walk all over you too. I would cut her off too. OP says, before all this started, my mum and her mum would walk over us both. Coming to Reddit helped me realize that my boundaries weren't boundaries and my mum was continuing to walk over me. I managed to grow a spine. She's not. I'm hoping going no contact with her, like I am the rest of my family, will make her realize she needs to stick up for herself. Someone says either your mum and her mum literally bullied the shit out of her or she did it because she genuinely felt sorry for your mum. Either way, not cool. I get the pressure, but having some crazy family run-ins myself, I would never, ever reveal info I didn't have to. The fact is, they didn't put the thumbscrews on her. She could have chosen to be stronger and not allowed your mum to go nuts in a bridal gown. OP says, my mum and her mum bullied it out of her. Pretty easily too from what she told me. She basically crumples like a tissue with the slightest bit of pressure. She's a massive people pleaser. She's always been that way. Even when we were kids, if she did something we weren't supposed to, she'd always confess to the crime as soon as my aunt mentioned grounding her. And just like when we were kids, she immediately confessed to everything too. Another commenter says that's so irritating for you, and probably her as well. No one wants two people berating you until you give in. It's very unfortunate, but you know that she can't be trusted with any information now. Opie says it's insanely irritating, but I assume that because she knew everything and how many issues my mum was causing, she'd keep her mouth shut for once. I'm not all that surprised she did. In hindsight, I should have realized she was a prime suspect and would have been easy to get information from. I guess I had too much faith that she'd grow a backbone. I'm not defending the cousin and what the cousin did by telling them not only about the wedding but about the meal too so the mum could turn up. Cousin was totally wrong to give away that kind of information. But there was a lot of talk about bullying behavior from the aunt and mum in this towards the cousin. And I do wonder if that's the case. I mean, looking at the whole story and the way the mum's got this binder of wedding plans, she turned up to the wedding in a wedding dress and the rest of the family didn't step back and think, hold up, that's fucking not normal. They've just gone, yeah, and they just continue to enable and defend her like this is like normal behavior. It's bizarre. Obviously, there could be a lot more going on there in the background that we don't know about, but I'm not going to diagnose or try anything like that. We've seen a lot of stories for a lot of different outcomes. Could be anything. It could be something. She could be just a total asshole, right? But it just left me wondering what kind of tactics did the aunt and the mum use to try and get that information out of cousin. Again, I'm not defending it anyway because it's not right to give that kind of information out at all. But just seeing the behavior of mother in this one story, I can only wonder the kind of behavior cousin faced at the same time. Yes, I really wish that she'd be able to stand up for herself, but we don't know what's gone on in her background. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We can only base it on this one story, which I find a bit heartbreaking, to be quite honest. But I'll just say it one more time. I'm not excusing the behavior. But now I'm going to turn this one to you guys. What do you guys make of this situation? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Let's move on to another story. And our next story comes from Zealous Ideal Wait 2698 and says, am I the a-hole for telling my husband the nanny is in charge? I want to preface this by saying that I'm aware this is a very privileged issue, but I'm trying to get some perspective on my opinion. My husband and I have 3 kids that are 10 months, 3 years and 6 years old. My husband has a high-profile job and it means he's gone often. I work a regular 9 to 5. We originally used daycare for our oldest, but middle was born right when the pandemic began, so we hired a nanny. She originally worked when I did, but by the time the baby came around, I was very overwhelmed doing bath and bedtime on my own, on top of developing postpartum depression. After a breakdown, we spoke with the nanny and she agreed to adjust her hours so she's helping me with dinner, bath and bed. We've gotten close over the past 6 months doing this. In many ways, she's become like a third parent to the kids. She's so good with them. We've created a routine that works well. I tend to the baby during bath and bed. She handles the older two. It's a nice rhythm and my mental health has gotten so much better. My husband isn't traveling all the time, but most nights. He isn't home for dinner and bed. He will help me weekends when he's home, but because he's gone so often, he's reluctant to be firm with the kids. There are times he's come home when our nanny is there. He tries to help her with bath and bed, but allow the boys to roughhouse. Lets them break the routine and it seriously throws them off and delays bedtime. My nanny shared with me she feels awkward. Obviously, she doesn't want to undermine her employer, but it just keeps making her job harder. But my husband also doesn't want her to go home when he arrives, as he says he can't handle it alone. I told him if that's the case, then he needs to defer to the nanny and follow her lead. She knows our boys best and she has to deal with the aftermath when they don't listen and give her a hard time. My husband feels that she's just an employee and he's the dad. His salary does pay for her. However, I don't feel this is fair to her. I told him he either follow her lead for bed and bath or he doesn't help at all. He told me I'm allowing the nanny to take over and replace him. Am I the a-hole? And we're starting the comments with Winsome Bunny, who says not the a-hole. I'm so angry reading these responses. Your husband doesn't want to parent. Your husband wants to be fun-time uncle who comes in, rolls everyone up, dishes out sweets, makes sure they don't make their bedtimes, and then dips out when the children start having unpleasant reactions to the disruption. These you're the a-hole comments are unhinged and blatantly sexist. Dads also have to fucking parent. It's completely reasonable if the only partner doing any parenting puts their foot down on unacceptable behavior partner. Edit, because I'm feeling salty on Opie's behalf. God, the sexism is strong here. Why does dad always get to be fun time guy and mum always has to be the downer doing the actual parenting? This is a huge problem in society. You're sitting here perpetuating a sexist system as if it's good for children. You know what is really good for children? Having a father who is actually an active partner in parenting. It's also completely false that children won't recognize as they grow that dad didn't give enough of a shit about them to actually be present in their lives. When they look back as adults, there's going to be mum they respect, mum who provided the safe, healthy environment for them to grow in. Ace Furious says, not the a-hole in quotes, but my husband also doesn't want her to go home when he arrives as he says he can't handle it alone, and says this is the crux of your situation. Horseplay and roughhousing are very important for your children's development. If dad wants to take over and play hee-haw, he can very well do that. That's great. But what he can't do is take over, create a mess, and then have the nanny come put out the fire. If the nanny is going to be taking care of business, we play by her rules. If dad is going to be taking care of business, then we can play by his. Trido Eat says, not the a-hole. As their dad, it is his job to make sure they are healthy and happy, and sticking to their routine is the best way of doing that. Aside from special occasions, of course. Either he needs the nanny there or he doesn't, but he can't insist she stay and then make her job worse. I'm sure at his high-profile job, he would immediately sack someone who interfered with his ability to competently perform his duties. If he wants to goof off with the kids, let him make time for them that isn't at bedtime. And I did try to find some of those "you're the a-hole" comments within the post, but they were either, I think, deleted or they're just completely buried. But now I'm going to turn this one to you guys. What do you guys make of this? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, your support, your time always means the absolute world to me. So thank you so much for being involved, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. Take care and much love.